Now let's take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. First off, the Department of State Services, DSS, has filed charges against former Kaduna State Governor Nasir El-Rufai at the Federal High Court in Abuja over allegations of unlawfully intercepting phone communications of the National Security Advisor Nuhu Ribadu. Court documents reveal that El-Rufai, during a live television interview on the 13th of February, admitted to knowledge of the interception. The prosecutors claim the act compromised public safety and national security, instilling fear among Nigerians. In the 3-count charge, the DSS describes the action of the former Kaduna State Governor as being in breach of the Cybercrimes Amendment Act of 2024 and the Nigerian Communications Act of 2003. They accuse El-Rufai of both direct involvement and failure to report individuals allegedly responsible for the unlawful interception. Also, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission has confirmed that former Kaduna State Governor Nasir El-Rufai is in its custody for questioning, with no assurance on how long he'll remain there. EFCC spokesperson Dele Oyewale accused the former governor of causing chaos by mobilizing supporters to the commission's office. Oyewale says El-Rufai is being interrogated over a range of issues, including comments he made during a recent television interview. He says while the live interview was ongoing, the Department of State Services contacted the EFCC to confirm whether its interrogation had concluded, indicating interest in questioning the former governor. Well, meanwhile, hundreds of protesters under the banner of civil society groups on Monday stormed the Kaduna State House of Assembly, demanding an update on legislature's probe into the administration of former Governor Nasir El-Rufai. The demonstrators are calling for transparency and accountability over allegations of corruption and human rights violation. Arise News correspondent Nisi Gabriel reports.
Carrying placards and chanting solidarity songs, the demonstrators asked lawmakers to provide updates on the investigation of former Governor Nasir El-Rufai, launched in June 2024. The group referenced allegations raised during the Assembly's inquiry, including claims of misappropriation of 423 billion naira in loans and other state funds during the former governor's tenure.
No single individual will take what belongs to the public, amass the wealth, and sit down, look at the face of Nigerian people, specifically Kaduna State, and abuse our accessibility. Never. So, this is a clarion call. All hands must be on deck. Mr. Speaker, we are here this afternoon in pains. And we are also going to ensure we watch all of these things with keen interest. No compromise. El-Rufai must face the music.
Protest leaders insist that no one is above the law, vowing to pursue all lawful means to ensure accountability if the process lacks transparency.
We must state clearly that immunity no longer applies once a public officer leaves office. Therefore, no investigation into matters of public interest should be allowed to stall or remain unresolved indefinitely. The people are asking for transparency and they deserve timely answers. Timely answers, I insist. We wonder, is Malam Nasru El-Rufai above the law? Of course, no, he's not. No one individual is bigger than the state institutions.
The Speaker of the Kaduna State House of Assembly says the House stands by its findings, assuring the protesters that justice may be delayed, but it will not be denied.
The Assembly did their legitimate and constitutional duty with fact findings, submitted the report to appropriate authorities. As you all know, the Assembly does not prosecute, but to do the normal and duly process by referring all our documented findings to appropriate authority.
The protest leaders later submitted a formal letter to the Speaker before dispersing peacefully, reaffirming their commitments to lawful civic engagement in pursuit of justice for the people of Kaduna. Nisi Gabriel. Arise News, Kaduna.
President Bola Tinubu on Monday assured Nigerians of continued economic reforms during a one-day visit to Adamawa, emphasizing citizen empowerment and inclusive growth. He praised Governor Umar Fintiri for delivering key projects in education, health and infrastructure, noting that federal and state collaboration is driving tangible results. Highlighting investment in agriculture and human capital, Tinubu commended the construction of roads, a modern high court, and schools as transformative for local communities. He also lauded traditional and religious leaders for fostering peace and unity and praised Nuhu Ribadu for his leadership in security efforts against banditry and terrorism. Governor Fintiri expressed gratitude to the president for his visit and support, detailing commission projects including model schools, expanded roads with underpasses and office complexes, while reaffirming the state's backing of federal reforms.
We are reflecting a true commitment of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. You are truly a reflection of who we are as a people united to achieve for our great nation. Umar Fintiri, I've seen tremendous amount of renewal, commitment from you, and investment in education of our children. And I commend your vision and commitment to development of Adamawa State. Your statement is clear. We work together for the glory today, tomorrow, and thereafter, investing in the people and making sure that we as a nation can build together a very happy family and a tremendous unity of achievement.
Mr. President, the ceremony we have performed today is a symbolic demonstration of what we have achieved across sectors and across the state. For instance, as we commission the model school today, it adds to the giant strides we are already making in the education sector to connect these model schools, which are basic centers. We are completing 3 brand new boarding mega science and technical schools across the 3 senatorial districts of the state. We are already employing 5,000 teachers to power the schools to optimum performance. The road project is part of our infrastructural and urban renewal campaign, which is aimed at bathing and Adamawa State with a mega capital city, which houses all the municipal trappings that can open up the state to investors and deliberately produce semi-urban centers that will serve as excellent cosmopolitan withholding hubs for containment of rural-urban drift.
Governor Abba Kabir Yusuf says his decision to join the All Progressives Congress APC is driven by the need to strategically position Kano State at the center of national governance for accelerated development. Speaking at the 2026 Grand Rally held at the Sani Abacha Stadium, the governor states that Kano is too significant and strategically vital to remain politically disconnected from the federal government. He explains that the move is not motivated by personal ambition ambition, but by a responsibility to secure greater opportunities and tangible benefits for the people of Kano. Governor Yusuf expresses appreciation to Vice President Kashim Shettima and governors from Jigawa, Sokoto, Kaduna, Katsina, Borno, Yobe, and Plateau states for attending the rally in solidarity. The national chairman of the All Progressives Congress, Professor Nentawe Yowata, also reaffirmed the party's 60-40 leadership sharing formula and praised the growing unity among members in Kano State. The federal government has also approved the sum of 5 billion naira as intervention fund for traders affected by the fire outbreak that razed large sections of the popular Singa market in Kano. Okay, all right. So we have a very brief segment this morning as we will be linking up with our first interview very shortly. But Rufai, your take on some of these stories this morning.
Okay, so where do I start from real quickly? As regards Kano, yes, all of the governors all say that one word. They're doing it so that they will be aligning with the center. No, they're doing it for their own political and selfish reasons. The earlier we know, the better it is for us. Yes, it's gone to the APC. And like I was saying yesterday, except the Constitution now starts to talk about governors that defect, and when they defect to another political party, despite the political party that brought them in, they must forfeit their seats. We're not going to move anywhere forward. Our democracy will continue to be a joke, just like it's continuing to be a joke. And that's why, you see, it is based on this that we are clamoring and we're crying. I'm happy. Somebody from the Senate is coming today. We'll talk about electronic transmission because the Senate actually misconstrued facts. You know, there was a report that was cited that the Senate said that somebody from the Senate, a spokesperson of the Senate, was saying that you can't based on the SEC report, that you can't effectively transmit election results because most parts. That report has been found to be false. The chairman of Alton, Association of Telecom Providers, said that report is totally false. In fact, they further said, like I said rightly, that you have 97% coverage plus 2G network. And you can, with 2G network, you can transmit, because this thing we are talking about is just 700 kilobytes. See, it will be on record, Ayo, and I'm saying for the opt-in time, that if they don't make electronic transmission mandatory, they are enemies of democracy, because we have nullified all the arguments. All the arguments of there's no network is illogical. Chairman of Alton has come out to say, those that provide the network has come out and say we have full capacity. We've built capacity over 1 billion infrastructure worth, and they have reiterated the message that what the Senate said was wrong. So where they are parading the reports of 70% broadband, foul, lies. So if they don't pass it, there's going to be an indictment on them. It's going to be a record they had a chance to do something that they didn't do anything. Yes, El-Rufai had his day in the EFCC yesterday. They grilled him overnight. There are still conversations going on about over 423 billion. They said most of the loans he took was not properly accounted for. I mean, we've had the allegation, because I remember we had somebody on the show a couple of months down the line, maybe about last year, where they came to talk about these allegations against El-Rufai. He's definitely going to answer it. The DSS too has also, filed a case in court against him as regards the phone tapping. We'll see how all of that pans out. While all of this was happening yesterday, I think in Adamawa, President Tinubu, sort of like passed a vote of confidence on Nuhu Ribadu by saying he's doing a good job and everything. They're going to fight and get rid of banditry and all of that. I mean, that will come as a very soothing one for Nuhu Ribadu. I'm hearing next person, so maybe I'll yield the floor quickly because of time.
Thank you so much.
Okay, 3 specific issues that are on the table. First, Nasir El-Rufai. There was an attempt to arrest him, but subsequently, he has now been more or less apprehended by the EFCC, and charges have been filed against him by the Department of State Services. Now, there are 2 issues on the table. Let me take them one by one. Now, the Department of State Services is filing charges against him on the basis of Section 37 of the 1999 Constitution, which says that individuals, all of us, have the right to privacy, and no one has the power to breach that privacy. The Cybercrime Act also criminalizes the invasion of people's privacy in terms of wiretapping, in terms of phone tapping, in terms of what they say in private. And the issue here is that Madam Nasir El-Rufai appeared on Arise TV and then alleged that someone gave him information that had been compromised on the National Security Advisor's phone. And then he said, well, he himself recognizes that it's technically illegal, but he spoke on the basis of that same information. Then there's also the Nigerian Nigerian Communications Commission Act, which also does not allow you to do wiretapping on your own, except it is something that is sanctioned by the court of law. So you cannot come and say, this person said this on his phone. That in itself is a felony. Then, of course, you have national security considerations. In this particular case, it was the National Security Advisor that was mentioned. And then, of course, persons who are affected by this can also, file civil charges and seek redress that they are entitled under Section 37 to privacy. Because there may well be certain individuals in this country who are recording other people when they call you, or you are, using some technology to interfere with their privacy. One lesson from all of this is that there is a felony attached to that when there is no court approval that a person's communication should be monitored. Now, it was on the basis of that the DSS now decided to go to court. Now, a number of questions raised in that regard. The first is, Nasir El-Rufai was quoting somebody else, a third party. What he said, did he say it under caution? He was on television, just talking on television. If that was an extrajudicial admission, then, of course, it was not under caution. So it will be problematic in law, as Inibe Effiong has argued correctly. The second point is that what is known under the National Security Agencies Act to Nigeria is the State Security Services, not the Department of State Services. So the question in law will be, can a non-existent entity prosecute? The third issue is that the DSS or the SSS does not have prosecutorial powers. That should have been done through the office of the Attorney General of the Federation. Number 4 is that there are national security dimensions to the case. Now, in terms of national security, the issue will be, how has the statement breached national security? So there is this intersection between politics and law. And that was why I was saying the other day that national security in Nigeria should not be reduced to the level of politics or conflict between two former friends who are now enemies, as it were. And so there's also that personal leg to it. But the overriding point with regard to national security is that the state, the Nigerian state, is trying to prove a point, which is important, that no individual is above the law. And 2, no individual can overwhelm the Nigerian state, because Nasir El-Rufai was beginning to sound and behave and overreaching himself as if he's in a position to overreach the Nigerian state, saying, for example, that the APC will not win based on his own decision in a democratic setup. He doesn't have such powers. And then calling out persons in government and saying all kinds of offensive things about them. The state must have considered that they also have a responsibility to say, you cannot overwhelm this state, and we will put you in your place. Now the other case is the EFCC case, where they are alleging that 432 billion under his watch when he was governor of Kaduna State still has to be accounted for. Now the EFCC has prosecutorial powers. So if on the weight of the evidence and technicalities, his counsel, his defense counsel, are able to get him freed on the DSS matter, and they may even refile the matter and give it to the AGF and the AGF can file it appropriately. So there are a lot of issues here, but the EFCC can also say, on behalf of the people of Kaduna State, we are looking for 432 billion. But the bottom line of it is about national security, and the point I have made that no individual, no matter how grandiloquent or vocal or confident, can overwhelm the Nigerian state. And I think that's the point that the government of the day is trying to make. There's the other issue about President Tinubu going to Adamawa and Vice President Shettima going to Kano to receive Governor Abba Yusuf, who defected who resigned from the NNPP January 23, who formerly joined the APC January 25, and now they had a song and a dance yesterday welcoming him into the party. Now, what we see here is Hurricane Tinubu, which has already captured 31 governors of the states, and maybe a few more will still join. 31 out of 36. Maybe they will still get more into the pool. And of course, you will expect that both President Tinubu and Vice President Shettima will be triumphant because it's their party that is bringing more people into the fold. Now, Governor Fintiri of Adamawa says he's acting on the choice of his people. He should not say that. He's acting on the basis of what is in his own interest. Governor Abba Yusuf of Kano State says, well, there are internal disputes within the NNPP and a lot of uncertainty. So it's also an act of self-preservation for him to just go to the APC, the ruling party, particularly at a time when the name of his principal, his godfather, has been mentioned in the Nigerian Religious Freedom and Accountability Bill 2026, that is the Smith-Moore Bill in the House of Reps, and he was named as one of the persons sponsoring terrorism. And in another 39-page document that was released, 3,000-page document. That one is 3,000-page document. The same Senator Kwankwanso was also named in that document. So, you may call it self-preservation. Some other people will say it is betrayal. Now, Governor Abba Yusuf has also joined the APC. So it's not about Kano State. It's also about his own self-interest. If your principal is in trouble, you just protect yourself. Alhaji Buba Galadima may call it betrayal, but that's not how Governor Yusuf and his supporters interpret it.
All right. Okay. Very quickly, I'll just talk about Adamawa State this morning. The president's visit to Adamawa State to the launch of some projects. I wouldn't go too deep into the conversation around celebrating the launch of roads and schools, as this ought to be the responsibility of government. But this is what we see currently in Nigeria. And because, unfortunately, it's not yet commonplace, we celebrate every road being launched. But the president paid a visit to Adamawa State, the first, I believe, since he came into office and under Omar Fintiri's administration. Let me just break down some of the things that he launched and the significance of this and some of the other areas that perhaps the government should look into with regards to infrastructure for the people. We often talk about a focus on the center and how we should look at the individual states, scrutinize their budget, look at the state of the states. I recall that it was CIAPS that used to score governors and states monthly and annually. I wonder if that has still continued. But let me talk about the projects. Very important. Number one was schools. He launched one of 21 mega model schools in Adamawa State. Now, in a state where education has been neglected or there is a gap in education infrastructure for so long, this was welcome development. The first launch was in Yola North. However, the criticism still exists that there are many underserved communities, particularly in the rural areas of Adamawa State that do not have access to quality education or education infrastructure. So maybe that's something to also look into, because many times in different states, the governors focus on the urban areas, on the cities, and neglect those living in the rural areas who perhaps might even be most in need or more in need of these infrastructure. So whilst this is good in terms of the mega model school, which is meant to serve all access from basic, junior secondary, senior secondary, pre-university education, fantastic idea, but it should still deepen into the rural areas and rural communities. Beyond that, there are some activist groups who are saying that there's $9 billion in funding, and the governor should provide counterpart funding for that funding from, aid organizations to come into the state. Perhaps it's also an opportunity to make a case for that, so that where there's money on the table and the government can provide counterpart funding for the benefit of the people, then it's a good idea to go into that. Away from education, we also look at, the roads. 8-lane, the governor has been known for his urban renaissance in the state, and this is also part of that. Road access, we cannot talk enough about how the importance of infrastructure like connectivity for goods and people across different areas in the state is a welcome development. However, the criticism is that a high percentage of the budget of Adamawa State has gone towards capital projects, neglecting some of the softer issues around, provision of infrastructure, poverty alleviation, schools, like I already mentioned in the state. We can talk about why some governments prefer to do capital projects, because it gives an opportunity for the awarding of contracts. But that should not be at the expense of providing the real needs and infrastructure for the people beyond the construction of roads. We see that across, from the FCT to River State to different states, where there's a concentration on capital projects. But there should also be an opportunity to improve the lives and livelihood of the people by ensuring that budgetary allocation goes to other areas. Then the youth and social development in the area of the NYSC camp, uplifting the NYSC camp, mentioned that they were going to name it after the president once it's completed. I believe that we should come to a point in this country where serving officers should not have any public infrastructure named after them until after their tenure, because it's littered around the country. And sometimes the most deserving of people who work hard, is just like, as we talk about, national honors, not get the honor deserved. Sometimes it's sycophancy. You build a structure, you name it after the governor, the president, for favors, when there are real people in the community who deserve such honors. So maybe it would be a great idea to halt naming of infrastructure or public, services until after the tenure of the government, and let's see how many people would actually get buildings named after them. Another area is the government building. So they spent billions of naira, about 6 billion naira, uplifting, constructing a government complex, put an electric gate, did the courts, and you wonder that if people are hungry in the state, because in 3 states in that region, Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe, are said to be at the risk of severe malnutrition based on current data. If people are hungry in the state, why should money be going into building complexes and homes and buildings when the people are hungry? These are the critical questions that we ask leaders. And that's why when we praise the launch or the construction of infrastructure of places like this, we have to think of the opportunity cost. What was left undone for this to be done? And look, usually when you compare that, it's not worth it. You cannot be living in a modernized complex when your people are hungry. It doesn't make any sense anywhere in the world. And so these are some of the areas that perhaps the governor might want to look into in the last few months of his tenure as governor of Adamawa State. Now, the president also used the opportunity to commend the NSA, Nuhu Ribadu, who is a son of the soil. And yes, while he said that he has made significant strides in fighting terrorism and in shoring up security in the country, there must be something that the president knows that a number of Nigerians are not yet aware of. Sometimes a lot of work goes behind the scenes before we actually see the manifestation. Because if you ask the average Nigerian, whether in Kebbi State, in Kwara State, in Niger State, where we've seen recent attacks, attacks, bandit attacks, terrorist attacks, they wouldn't have the same sentiment as to giving him such glowing commendations and the likes. But like I mentioned, the president might know something that we are not yet aware of. What we now want to see is the manifestation of the great work that is being done by the NSA so that Nigerians truly feel safe, especially when it comes to fighting terrorism in the country. I'll end on this point with regards to El-Rufai. I think it's important when we have serious matters and cases on our hands not to politicize it. As we see where you can hire a protester or protest a dime a dozen, where we see people come out to say, oh, we want to, it's an attack, it is personal attack. But when you look at the evidence before you and they tell you that someone who was meant to serve the state, even though it is still allegedly, he's innocent until proven guilty, they're saying that he has a case to answer with the way that funds that were borrowed, loans to during his administration could not be accounted for or did not go through due process. And you don't even want an investigation into that to see how your money was spent. Does that make sense? And so that's why we keep asking about active citizenship and the level of poverty and how it makes people do certain things as tools in the hands of our politicians. But we look forward to seeing the end of this case, and hopefully he will be treated fairly. And also, like has already been mentioned, there will be no sacred cows under this administration.